Hi everyone. Today we're going to be looking at gender and queer theory for film analysis, specifically with regards to the movie The Congress. Gender and queer theory deal predominantly with the idea of two key concepts. Number one is the idea that gender is a construct. It is not black and white. It is not necessarily something that is set out by biology. It is actually a social and cultural construct. In the modern age, we know this a little bit more with regards to the continuum of sexuality, the understanding that gender identity is more fluid, but once upon a time, this was obviously a very serious cause, and it does apply to literature, storytelling, and filmmaking. The basic premise is you have a system that's in power, and that system, the dominant system, neat, orderly rows, all the same color. By their logic and understanding, in an effort to control, there are the outliers, the other, which is a very important concept. They stand out. If everything is either normal or other, then that way you can make it seem perverse. You can make it seem like it is something that needs to be controlled or gotten rid of or criminalized. The truth of the matter is the fact that we all know that it's not just about the white pieces and the black pieces. There are other pieces that don't fit the pattern. Every one of those patterns diversifies. Each of them provides a unique conceptual rainbow of possibilities. Every single one of them making us question and think what exactly it is to be normal. So how does all of this relate necessarily to the film The Congress? First, let's take a look at the way that Robin Wright's children are portrayed. Her son, Aaron, long hair, with some severe disabilities with regards to his sight and his sound, is perceived as different. You could imagine him as the other. The daughter, with her radical ideas, and her short cropped hair, and her unique alternative style, is obviously the alternative to what might be deemed as normal. Robin Wright is a participant in the most normalizing force that's out there, Hollywood, entertainment, bringing you all of the heterosexist ideals with regards to what woman is, what man is, and how they're supposed to be attracted to each other. The problem, of course, is the fact that Robin Wright is facing a controversy in the idea that she now has no physical appeal, or at least she's told that by the men in her life, and so therefore needs to digitize her image so that they can remake her again and again and again. Her son and the issues that he has, represented quite well by that symbol of the kite, deal with the aspect of the fact that he can't quite belong, and that she, as a mother, is willing to sacrifice in order to try to get him to get through, to get by, to live in a world in which he may at least have some sense of normalcy. What proceeds to then happen, of course, is that over the next 20 years, technology advances to the point in which we can become the cartoon versions of ourselves. Now remember, in the cartoon world, with all of its phallic fishes and its genitalia plants and all of those elements that are there, everybody is representing extremes of sexuality, but not necessarily a diversity in terms of gender. That doesn't actually occur until we reach the chemical world. Now remember, the original point is they were in a cartoon space in which you could take a vial and appear as the cartoon image of yourself, and your thoughts and fantasies could live out. And in that space, you had characters that were highly sexualized. You had extremes in terms of almost, by very definition, cartoonish examples of heterosexual normativity. The chemistry element was originally supposed to be something they could sell. It was something with the idea of the fact that they thought that you could own and possess that which you wanted to be, that which you wanted to be attracted to, that which you wanted to become. As they talk about with Robin Wright, they can eat her, they can drink her, they can breathe her in. None of this really has anything to do with regards to being able to identify as gender fluid. Because remember, once the revolution occurs and they are able to fight against the corporate entity, it's then that everybody becomes, for the next 19 years or so, caught up in this chemical world in which they are in their idealized other self. Here's where we start to see images of a lot of very popular gay and queer icons. You have mythical stories and mythology that deals with people identifying with different genders and transforming and becoming one thing and not the other. And the idea is the fact that by the chemistry being given off, that's what people perceive you to be. Which means whatever the reality is on Earth, it doesn't matter, because here you can actually be that diverse and unique continuum of self in terms of your sexuality, in terms of who you are as a gender. All of those elements are achieved, but there's a trick. Remember, unfortunately, in the real world, everybody is going through another form of androgyny. They're going through another form of genderless and sexless existence. In the reality of the harshness of the world, there are the scientists and the people who are in charge, all wearing the exact same uniform, men, women, genders of all types. And then on Earth, you have people who are, due to their poverty and their starvation and their living conditions, have all become wearied and gray and bland and unified versions of themselves. So even though we have this beautiful chemical space in which you can become whoever you want, remember Robin herself, in an effort to track down her son, switches genders and becomes her son in order to be able to try to see where he may wind up. All of that freedom exists in that fantasy space, which is an escape from the real world. The real world has provided another form of gender equality, but at the extreme of the fact that everybody is lacking. Nobody has any form of expression. Everybody has been, their gender has been whitewashed by poverty and harshness. A good indication of the fact that despite their level of control, they are starting to lose control, is a scene in which, in Abrama, where Robin Wright is singing a Leonard Cohen song, dressed very androgynously, dressed almost as a man. It's an illusion, it's a dream within a dream, but ultimately it's about a system of control. Very uniformed and very official and harsh, and almost Gestapo-like police shut her down. They don't want her to express herself in such a way. All of this to show the dominance and the control that's taking place right up until the revolution occurs, in which all of that gets freed. All of those systems of power, all of the so-called normal elements, all of those heteronormative actions that are taking place, that have all been institutionalized, that have all been put into power, now are gone. Keep in mind that this is a film studio, but they act almost as if they're the government, almost act as if they are the policing force of culture itself. But they do get overthrown. Before the chemical revolution takes place, there are a couple of instances in which genderqueer theorists would be very intrigued by. The first is Robin Wright's agent, Al. His story of him as a 10-year-old boy taking the freaks and those who are different and being able to exploit them, utilize their differences, utilizing their otherness, essentially, and selling it for a profit. He does confess later on that the exact same thing is happening with Robin, which does help her to relate that as a woman who is aging into her 40s in Hollywood, the opportunities to be a part of that heterosexual fantasy are starting to fade, and that she is almost as other as the freaks that Al exploited when he was a child. Their weaknesses, their being on the outside, their being marginalized, is what he takes advantage of. A similar thing happens with regards to the studio executives who give Robin Wright a very similar speech in terms of, and want to be able to exploit her by redefining her again and again. Now, what does happen by the time that you get to the cartoon world and into the chemical world is that you will notice that there are people who want that image of Robin Wright as the warrior to be their avatar, to be their image of themselves. What's happening there is that they are reclaiming ownership. The word queer was a very negative and derogatory term for someone whose sexuality was not defined as normal. But what happened was that it was renamed, re-owned, reappropriated so that it was able to gain some power. So now queer theorists and people who are into queer culture will use it as a term and a badge of pride. in a very similar way, despite the fact that she is being exploited for the last 20 years in terms of that idealized version of herself, she has become, in an interesting way, a queer icon.